Hey everyone, thank you for watching. Today's video is going to be my full review on the new Jaclyn Hill and Morphe The Vault collection. So I have the 4 eyeshadow palettes here. I will be giving my thoughts on each one. I will also be doing some comparison swatches to the original Jaclyn Hill palette and then also a few others in my collection as well. I did do a first impression video with all 4 of these palettes last week on my channel. I will have it linked down below if you haven't seen it. I did a look with each palette so you get 4 different looks in that video. But as it was a first impression, you know, I was saying that I would come back to actually review everything after I've tried all of the shadows and all the palettes on my eyes, see how they've all worked, seen how they wear throughout the day and all that good stuff. So today's video is going to be my full review. I have a lot to say, so why don't we go ahead and get started. So just like in my first video, I'm just going to go through each palette and I'm just going to go in the same order as I did in last week's video as well. I will have timestamps down below in case there's a palette that you are most interested in. I did that in last week's video too because I know this one will probably be longer as well. So to kind of hop into it with Ring the Alarm here, this was one where I wasn't sure when I saw the collection come out, and I did put this in a Will I Buy It video. I had already saved the collection, but so many people had wanted to hear me talk about it in my Will I Buy It series that I went ahead and did it. I broke down my thoughts of it, and I also kind of put in order what palettes I was most interested in. This was actually kind of like the 3rd palette that I was interested in because this one to me was kind of the most similar to the original Jaclyn Hill palette. Honestly, this I think is probably the palette that I'm most impressed with out of all 4 of the palettes, and I'm surprised to say that. I felt like I wasn't working any harder with this palette than I was in the original Jaclyn Hill palette. You need this palette though, because like I said, I felt like it was pretty similar to the original Jaclyn Hill palette. So I have some notes here of shades that I thought were going to be similar amongst the 2 palettes. So one thing for sure, when I saw Lolly, I was like, I know that color is in the original Jaclyn Hill palette. So I'm actually going to swatch Lolly against the shade Sissy in the Jaclyn Hill palette. So this one here is Lolly from Ring the Alarm. Next to that, I'm going to swatch Sissy from the original Jaclyn Hill palette. These are similar to one another, but they are not the same. And I was surprised because I honestly thought that they would be, but I'll swatch because a lot of people were saying that they thought the 3 from the top row of the Jaclyn Hill palette were all really similar to Lolly. So I just went ahead and swatched. This one here is Little Lady and this one here is Faint. So again, we have Lolly from the new palette and then we have Sissy, Little Lady, and then Faint. So next up I want to show you Boom, which is this shade right there, and I'm going to compare it to Firework from the original palette, which is this shade right here. Looking at them, I thought the 2 were fairly similar. So Boom is on top here, and then Firework is on the bottom. Boom to me is more of like a bronzy shimmer, where Firework has more of a red to it. So again, I didn't think that those were exact dupes. So next up I want to show you Bomb Ass from the Ring the Alarm palette, and I wanted to swatch that against Cran Apple, which is this one here in the original palette. When I saw Bomb Ass and Ring the Alarm, I was like, I know that color is in the original Jaclyn Hill palette. So this one here is Bomb Ass, and this one here is Cran Apple from the Jaclyn Hill palette. So again, these 2 are really not similar. It is overcast today and raining. First day of summer that I'm filming this. So I do have my ring light on, but hopefully it's not going to throw them off too much. But if you can see, Bomb Ass is more of a brighter red, and then Cranberry just kind of has that deeper tone to it. So once again, I was pretty for sure on both of these that they were going to be exact dupes, and I was fairly surprised that they weren't. I wanted to show you Siren from the new palette, and I wanted to swatch that next to Chip from the original palette. I thought that these 2 would be fairly similar looking at them in the palettes, but again, they really are not. Siren is on top there and it has more red tones to it. Chip is on the bottom and that one is more of a matte brown red. So those 2 I didn't think were super similar. And then I was going to swatch the purple from the palette. This one is called Framed. And then I was going to swatch that one against Soda Pop, which is here in the original palette. Okay, so on top we have Framed and then we have Soda Pop. So these are both kind of in like the purple family, but they are completely different purples from one another. Comparing against the 2 palettes, I really didn't find a lot of dupes for Ring the Alarm, which surprised me because when I was thinking about what palettes I could swatch or you know, kind of compare in this video to each of the palettes, when I thought of Ring the Alarm, this was the palette that I was thinking of, and I really couldn't find exact dupes within the palette. So again, this is the one that I've been most impressed with quality wise to it, that I think is closest to quality amongst this palette. But one thing that I find very strange with the collection is that I don't find that to be very consistent amongst the other palettes. Moving over to the second palette that I tried, this is the Dark Magic palette. So this is more of the green palette, as you can see. This one I was nervous for, and when I talked about it in my Will I Buy It video, I said this was one that I was on the fence about because the colors inside really intimidated me. I struggled a bit doing my makeup tutorial in that first impressions video. I mentioned that I thought the green that I used, which is Inside Job, I mentioned that I thought that that one was looking fairly patchy on my eyes, so that one was tougher to work with. Overall, once I got done and I had my lashes on and I had the shimmer added in there, I liked the way that it looked. I liked the technique that I used, kind of the mermaid look with the wing as the shadow instead of using like winged liner. It kind of had that effect with the eyeshadow. I liked it, but it was hard to get to. And in that video, I compared it to a look that I had done previously that I'd been getting people requesting me to do a tutorial with. And I had done that look with the Colourpop and Kathleen Lights Dream Street palette. And I said that I thought the Kathleen Lights and Dream Street palette was easier to use. And I still stand by that. I played around with that palette also this week and kind of compared it to this palette. And I would still say if you do have that palette, they're not exact dupes to one another, but I don't know, like if those are the shades you're kind of wanting to reach for in this palette and maybe you already have the Dream Street palette, I don't think that you would need it, because I actually do think that Dream Street is an easier palette to work with. So these are what the two palettes will look like. So I mean, you can see that they're definitely not supposed to be like dupes for one another. I'll do a couple of swatches so you can see the differences between them. I was just kind of going off that one look that I did, and I said I had an easier time with this palette, and I did. Potion is it's a very interesting color, and it's extremely hard to work with. I really haven't had very good luck with that shade in general. And I think kind of overall for me with this palette, since it is mostly matte and it is mostly darker mattes, they're just harder to work with. And that's why I was on the fence about this palette. I do have to say that a lot of the darker mattes I do find to be fairly patchy. Busted, Inside Job, and Mojo especially, they are just not the easiest to work with. So if you have those colors in other palettes, you know, I would say, and you like those other palettes, I would say probably stick with those palettes. Kind of what I think about the Dark Magic one. It was hard to work with, just as I was kind of experiencing in my first impression video. But to do a couple swatches, so I want to compare it first to the original Jaclyn Hill palette, because I know that's been the most questioned is it super similar to the original palette? So I have not been looking at myself in the viewfinder at all, so I have no idea, like, I'm looking crazy. Look up, girl. Look up sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to first swatch Power Cut. And then there was two shades in the original palette that I want to swatch it to, and that was Obsessed over here, and then also Hustle, which is this one right here. And I really didn't find a dupe for it. I of course wanted to swatch some of these greens as well, so I'm going to swatch this one here is Trickery, and I wanted to swatch that one against Diva from the original palette. Looking at them in the pans, I was like, they probably won't be too similar, but again, I just wanted to be able to show you guys so you have an idea. And then next up, I wanted to swatch Inside Job from the new palette, which is the matte green. I wanted to swatch that against Enchanted, which is also the dark green from the original palette. So these two swatches down here. So we have the new one here and then the original palette. So again, they're not exact dupes to one another, but they are fairly similar. But I think the green in the original palette is actually better. But even on the eyes, because I have played with the green in this palette as well. It's not my most used shade out of this palette, but I have played with it. And I felt like I wasn't getting the amount of patchiness that I was getting when I was playing with the Dark Magic palette. So not complete dupes, but they are very similar to one another, and I think once you start to blend them out, they would be very similar to one another, but I think the one in the original palette is better. And because I was talking about the Dream Street palette, I thought I would show you a couple swatches here. So I wanted to swatch the blues in the palette. So Busted is the matte blue in there, and I wanted to swatch that against this second blue right here, which I think is called Water Bearer from the Dream Street palette. So on top we have the Jaclyn Hill, and on bottom we have the Colourpop. So I feel like you can just tell from the swatch right away, just like what I was saying, I think that this one is better in the Dream Street palette. So if that's like the color that you're really eyeing out of the Jaclyn Hill palette, and you're like, I really, really want that blue, and you have the Dream Street, I don't think that you need Dark Magic, because again, even swatched against each other, I think that you can tell that it is better in the Colourpop. And then there's really not a lot of other similarities between these two palettes, but just to show you the shimmers, so I am going to go ahead and swatch Power Cut. I'm going to swatch that against what looks like the silver in the palette there, which I believe is called Kaleidoscope. So these are not super similar either. They look more similar on camera, I feel like it's coming across, but the Power Cut is more of like a silver and almost like a hint of purple in it, and then Kaleidoscope actually has like a green shift into it. So if you can tell the difference between those, and I think that's kind of where the similarities end with the palette, so I just wanted to show you that because I did make reference to it in my first impression video. So next up we have, I think the reason why I'm in such like a bad mood right now, because this one really bummed me out. So next up we have the yellow palette, which is called Armed and Gorgeous. So inside you have all these beautiful yellows in here, and oranges and golds, and I was very excited when I talked about this in my Will I Buy It video. I said this was the second palette that I was most excited for and that I was planning to pick up for myself. Now, when I did my first impressions video, I tried to do a different look for each of the 4 looks. So I had a halo eye, a smoky eye, you know, the mermaid eye with the winged with the shadows, and then when I went into the yellow palette, I did something super, super simple. So in that first impressions video, I put a little bit of Agent into my crease, I put Access all over the lid, and I put a little bit of Coin onto my lid as well over the yellow. And I loved it, I loved it, I love that look. I thought it was great. I'm so into yellow looks right now. I keep doing them. I think they are so much fun. I thought it was perfect for summer. I was like, yes. I was like, I'm gonna love this palette. I know it, I can feel it. And I have had horrible luck with this palette, you guys. Horrible luck with this palette. Actually, the other day, I was filming for Friday's video, which was a flashback favorites video where I actually talked about this video or this palette and falling in love with it last year. And I said, but stay tuned because, you know, I might be like singing a different tune in Sunday's video where I'm reviewing the new palettes. And I said, let me just say that this isn't the first makeup look that I've tried to do today. And when I was filming for that video, I first started, I was, you know, gonna use this palette again to make sure that I was trying all the shades out. And I actually had to go and remove my makeup because it was going so wrong. And I very rarely have to do that. Like, yes, my makeup skills aren't up there and I never have worked as a makeup artist, but I typically can make things work. And it was just going wrong, and then it went worse, and then we took another wrong turn, and I was like, oh, why is this happening? It had gone so wrong, and it looked so bad that I knew that I could not film a video with that eye look, and I am so sad about that. I ended up doing another look for that flashback video, and I liked it, but it was still a struggle to get there. I'm so shocked. I'm so shocked that this didn't work out for me. I so am. And I mean, I know I only used like 3 shades in my first impression, so of course you can't really go off of much with the first impression, but I'm so surprised. Access, I still think is a beautiful color. I love that as a yellow color. Even Coin and also Guilt Trip, I really like those shades also. I think those are really nice. I used Classified all over my lid for Friday's video, and I had a pretty tough time with this one. Even when I was using a damp brush, I was having a really tough time building that up, and it took me a while. There was fallout on my face, and I was just like, what in the heck is going on here? This green in Top Secret, I can't use it. I can't use it. I can't figure out what to do with it because every single time that I've tried to blend it onto my lid, it's really, really bad. It's really bad. It's really patchy. I tried to pack it all over my lid once as just like, I wasn't doing a look, but I was almost kind of like doing like a live swatch on my eyes, but just with me. And even still, it just doesn't look good just packing it onto the lid. And I'm like, what? No, how is this happening? Smooth Criminal is also incredibly hard to use, really hard to blend, and really patchy. These were colors that I had on my eyes originally. Even Secure is tough to work with as well. Agent isn't terrible, but it's a very like strange color. It's a very like weak orange brown. VIP is a really nice like stark white shade, but overall I really think like these three are the best in the palette, and the other shades just are not really working. I'm so surprised, and I'm so bummed. If you saw my first impression, if you saw my will I buy it, like, you know how excited I was for this collection. This palette especially, I really wouldn't be able to recommend because I'm sure you have a yellow and I'm sure you have some gold shimmers. Man, I feel like a negative Nancy in this video, and I don't like it. I'm not a negative person. I like to find positivity in anything that's on YouTube and that's in real life. Like, I love rainbows and s'mores, and, well, s'more sounds good right now. I also want to be honest, and I think that this one was the one that I had such a different reaction to from my first impression that I just really wanted to be able to come on and say like, hey, this is like a total 180 from my first impression. But, you know, obviously I only used a handful of shades in that one. So after I've tried everything on my eyes, this one is really, really difficult for me to recommend. The mattes are so hard to work with in this palette. Another thing that I just find interesting about this collection is I feel like the palettes are different from one another. Ring the Alarm I had very little problems with. Armed and Gorgeous, I can't freaking use. Like, I know I'm not the best, but damn, like, it shouldn't be that hard. Oh my goodness, it's just makeup. It's not that big of a deal, but let's just go into some comparison swatches. Let me get my list out. Which one are we doing? Armed and Gorgeous. Okay, so to show some comparison swatches to the Jaclyn Hill palette, I wanted to swatch VIP, which is this white shimmer, and I thought I would swatch it against Beam. Again, these two I didn't think would be very similar. It's the second one here. I truly didn't think that they would be similar, but, you know, for comparison's sakes, let's do it. So VIP is on top. Again, that's a really nice shade. It's not something that I'm going to use a ton, but it's a nice shade. Beam is on the bottom. So definitely when I saw the shade Access in here, the second one, I immediately thought of Creamsicle from the original palette. So I definitely wanted to swatch those against each other. So we have the new palette on top, if you can see that okay. And then we have Creamsicle here on the bottom. These swatch pretty similar to one another. I'll say that Creamsicle has more orange in it, where the one from the new palette is more yellow. But honestly, I think that it looks way more of like a true yellow on the eyes, and you could see that when I did the first impression, where I think that the one from the original palette still pulls more orange even on the eyes. So next up I have Smooth Criminal from the new palette, which is a brown, and I swatched that against Mocha from the original palette and also Central Park from the original palette because they both look to be kind of a deeper brown, but actually the two from the original palette look more similar than Smooth Criminal from the new palette. I will say for this palette, even the shimmers, nothing really screamed that we would have exact dupes from the Jaclyn Hill palette, but I did go ahead and swatch Classified from the new palette, and I did swatch that against two different shimmers. So I did against Meeks, which is right here, and then also Queen, because it looked like Queen was kind of more of like that deeper color, but again, nothing too similar to each other. So we have the new palette on top, and then we have Meeks and Queen from the original palette. Some people mentioned to me when they thought Armed and Gorgeous, they thought the Colourpop Yes Please palette. So I'm gonna go ahead and swatch again Access, which is the yellow. I'm gonna swatch it against the yellow in the Colourpop palette. I mean, I feel like you can kind of tell right off the bat how they swatch, that they look really different. They actually look more similar on the eyes to one another, I will say. I also wanted to swatch Guilt Trip, which is the shimmer right here. I wanted to swatch that against this gold right here. Now these to me are almost an exact dupe to one another. So we have the new Jaclyn Hill on top and then the Colourpop on bottom. Two more quick comparisons. So I thought I would swatch Prowl in the new palette against this kind of darker shade down here. These two are not super similar to me. So we have the new Jaclyn Hill on top and the Colourpop on bottom. So you can see that they are not really dupes to one another. And then I also wanted to swatch Secure from the Jaclyn Hill palette and swatch that against this top orange shade from the Colourpop Yes Please. And again, these are not super similar to one another as well. So those are just some swatches comparing it to the Yes Please palette. So it's interesting because there are some similarities across these palettes. Honestly, the Yes Please palette is not my favorite palette from Colourpop, but I still would recommend it over this one. And unfortunately, Armed and Gorgeous just happened to be a huge miss for me, which I'm quite bummed about because that was one that I was one of the ones that I was most excited for. So unfortunately, I really would not be able to recommend this palette. But next up, I want to talk about the fourth and final palette. This one is Bling Boss. This is the purple palette. This one was the one that I said I was most excited for when I filmed my Will I Buy It video. I am so into purples right now, and when I was seeing this and I was seeing the swatches, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. I loved the halo eye that I did in that video, and I think that was the most because I said, what is your favorite look? And I think it was the purple halo eye, hands down. I filmed another video after filming the Morphe video. I filmed my beauty empties and I wore that same look. And I got so many compliments. Once again, is what I have on my eyes today as well. Halsey, this was the one that I used in my first impression. I really didn't have any issues with that one. I did spray my brush and I had a fine time using it. I will say Glitz and Glam, you just have to build up quite a bit. And then I use Bling Bling today on my eyes. It's what's in the inner part of my eyes. And once again, I just have to build it up. So the shimmers across the board don't have as much pow pizzazz as maybe as I thought that they were going to. I really like that we have Hush Hush in there. Rockstar is what I do have on the outer, my outer lids as well today. Gem I think is really beautiful. I love Gem so much. I think that's a really nice color. And actually Spark. Spark is one where I didn't use it. Well, I have it on my lower lash line today, but I also just kind of did that like live swatch thing when I was just wanting to make sure I had all the shades on my eyes. I actually really like that one. I thought I was gonna have a lot of difficulty with it, and I really didn't. So thankfully that one put me in a better mood. I will say though that Mystic was harder to blend for me, and that one was a little bit more on the patchier side, but out of the entire palette, I think that was the one that I like had the most amount of trouble with. I still feel like I would suggest Ring the Alarm first and then Bling Boss, and then actually Dark Magic and Armed and Gorgeous. That would kind of be the way that I would go. I don't think it's like an absolute must-have palette, and I did want to compare it to this Huda Beauty palette, the Mauve Obsessions, Marvelous Mauves, the Mauve Obsessions palette. So I'll do some swatches against this one as well and do some comparisons to the Jaclyn Hill palette. So first I wanted to swatch Bling Bling, which is the first shade here, and I wanted to swatch that one against Faint, which is this third shimmer in the top row on the original palette. So those are the first two swatches. I feel like again on camera they're gonna come across pretty similar, and they're definitely similar, but they're not exact dupes. I also, of course, wanted to swatch Gem because when I saw Gem and when the original palette picture came out, ooh, that shade's already in the original palette, because I was thinking that it would be really similar to Royalty here in the original palette, but these are definitely very different shades. So we have new palette on top here and the original palette on the bottom. So you can see that the original one in Royalty is just more of a deeper red, but they even feel different to one another. Gem from the new palette is more of like a smooth metallic, where the one from the original palette it's not chunky, but they're different. I'm also gonna swatch Mystic from the new palette, and I wanted to swatch that against Soda Pop, the second one from the original palette. So those are the top two. So we have the new palette on top and the original on bottom. For the bottom swatches, I wanted to swatch Sparks right here, and I swatched that against Jax in the original palette, which is this third one right here. And once again, I didn't find these to be too similar to one another, but I actually want to also swatch Hunts against those ones as well, just to see. Okay, so we have the new palette here, and then we have Jack's from the original and also Hunt's from the original as well. So, okay, and then the last swatch against the two, so I'm going to swatch Glitz and Glam from the new palette, and then I also swatched it with two colors here. So I did SBN from the original and also Obsessed from the original, and these as well are not very similar. So I'll also do some swatches with this one against the one from Huda Beauty. Okay, so first up I swatched Bling Bling from the Jaclyn Hill palette, and I did this Lash Shimmer on the top row against the Huda Beauty. These are almost identical shades. So if you can see there, in camera and in person, they are nearly identical. Jaclyn has maybe just a little bit more pink to it, but they are very, very similar. To swatch some mattes, I swatched Hush Hush, which is the second one in the Jaclyn palette, and I swatched it to the middle matte from the Huda Beauty. So these are fairly similar to one another. There is a slight difference between the two. I would say Jaclyn's has more of like a purple lilac undertone, where Huda's is more of like a red purple. They are pretty similar to one another, but they are not exact. So I wanted to swatch Mystic from the Jaclyn Hill palette, and then I was going to swatch that against the first shade here in the Huda Beauty. Again, these two are almost an exact dupe for one another. So those are the shades that I thought would be closest to one another from this palette. So you can see there are a couple dupes in there. So this one definitely I feel like is really similar to this one. If I had to recommend one over the other, I mean, they are not the exact same palettes, but I love these Huda Beauty eyeshadow palettes. These are $27, so they're more expensive than the $15, but I enjoyed these across the board. I think they are so well done. I have 4 of them now, and I've bought them all myself, and I'm very impressed with them, so I would highly recommend these. All right, guys, so those are my thoughts on each of the 4 individual palettes, how they've been working for me now that I've been playing with them for a full week, swatches against the original palette, and some other palettes in my collection, and what I think against the two. So to wrap it up, to give my final thoughts on the full collection, I truly don't think that I would be able to recommend getting all 4 palettes. I think that there's a lot of inconsistencies between the 4, which is just super surprising to me. If I were to be comparing it to the original Jaclyn Hill palette, if you're saying, hey, I don't have either, which one should I get? I'm gonna say the original Jaclyn Hill palette. This palette I think is fantastic. It's $38 for 35 different shadows. You can get it available at Ulta now, but the quality in this palette I think is so good. I had the impression that we were going to get a big palette such as the Jaclyn Hill palette and just have it kind of like chopped up into 4 little palettes, but it would be the same quality across all 4, and I just don't feel like I'm getting that. Some of the mattes are different, some of the shimmers are different. So I think as I started playing with them more throughout the week, I was just getting caught off guard of how different I thought each of the palettes were. That's why I can't wholeheartedly recommend the collection. I was just kind of in a sour mood the whole time because I was really excited for this collection. I think you could see that in my past videos, but it doesn't matter how excited I am for something, I still have to be able to come on and try to do my best review and give you guys my best thoughts. So I really hope that you found this video helpful. I hope that you found the swatches and the comparisons helpful. That's gonna do it for today's video, guys. Thanks for hanging in with me. I know this one was a long one, but I wanted to get all my thoughts out there. If you guys did enjoy this video or you found it helpful, I hope that you'll give this one a thumbs up. I hope that you'll also consider subscribing before you go, and I'll catch you guys in tomorrow's video.